Invisible walls, raising spiritual defenses around those you love. Good morning, beloved brother and beloved sister in Christ. Precious son and precious daughter of God, I welcome you to this powerful moment of intercession, where we will construct impenetrable spiritual barriers around those you hold dear. May the peace of the Lord be with you as we prepare to build defensive walls that eyes cannot see but faith can establish, invisible fortifications that will shield your loved ones from harm. Prepare your heart, for what we do today will create supernatural protection that surrounds those you cherish with divine security. My dear brother and my dear sister, throughout Scripture, we see God establishing protective boundaries around His people. He placed cherubim with flaming swords at Eden's entrance to guard the way to the tree of life. He instructed Noah to seal the ark against the floodwaters. He established the pillar of fire and cloud as a barrier between Israel and Egypt. He commanded the building of walls around Jerusalem for protection. These physical defenses in biblical history reveal a spiritual principle. God desires to surround His children with protective barriers, and He invites us to participate in building these walls through intercessory prayer. Beloved child of God, as we begin this sacred work of constructing spiritual defenses, bring before the Lord those precious individuals who need divine protection, family members navigating dangerous seasons, friends facing spiritual attacks, children encountering harmful influences, elderly loved ones in vulnerable conditions, colleagues in hostile environments. The Lord knows each one intimately, and He stands ready to establish walls of protection around them as we pray in faith. Precious brother and precious sister, we approach this throne of grace today not with doubt or timidity, but with the confident faith of master builders, knowing that our prayers are laying spiritual foundations, erecting protective barriers, establishing watchful towers, and securing strong gates around those we love. We come with the authority given to us in Christ, understanding that what we bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and what we loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. The defensive walls we construct today through intercession will stand as powerful protection in the spiritual realm. Almighty God, Master Architect of the universe, we come before you today to participate in the sacred work of building invisible walls of protection around those we love. You who designed the walls of New Jerusalem, with foundations of precious stones and gates of pearl, we ask that you would help us construct spiritual defenses of similar beauty and strength around our loved ones. For while earthly walls can crumble and physical barriers can be breached, the spiritual fortifications established by your power stand eternal and impenetrable. Lord God Almighty, we first lay the foundation of these protective walls in the unchangeable bedrock of your word. Just as wise builders establish their structures on solid rock rather than shifting sand, we base these spiritual defenses on the unshakable truth of Scripture. We declare over our loved ones the promise of Psalm 91, that those who dwell in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. We claim the assurance that He shall give His angels charge over them to keep them in all their ways. We stand on the truth that no weapon formed against them shall prosper. Father of lights, we construct the first wall of protection around the minds of our loved ones. In an age of information warfare and mental health challenges, shield their thought lives from deception, from despair, from confusion, from harmful ideologies. Like the ancient city walls that prevented enemy infiltration, establish barriers that block the entrance of destructive thoughts, images, and suggestions. Fill the spaces within these walls with your truth, your peace, your wisdom, your perspective, creating a mental environment where faith flourishes and fear finds no foothold. God of all wisdom, we build the second wall around the hearts of those we love. Their emotional well-being is under constant attack in this broken world, assaulted by disappointment, rejection, betrayal, and trauma. Construct impenetrable emotional defenses that prevent unnecessary wounding while still allowing healthy vulnerability. Create sacred boundaries that filter what enters their hearts, admitting love, joy, peace, and hope, while blocking bitterness, resentment, despair, and fear. For as Solomon wisely observed, the heart must be guarded above all else, for from it flow the springs of life. Loving Shepherd, we erect the third wall around the bodies of our loved ones. Their physical health faces threats from disease, accident, violence, and harmful substances. Build biological barriers that resist illness, prevent injury, repel attack, and reject toxins. Station angels along these walls as divine sentinels, commissioned to protect physical well-being. We pray Psalm 34:7 over them. The angel of the Lord encamps all around those who fear him and delivers them. Let these heavenly guardians stand watch over their physical safety day and night. Divine builder, we raise the fourth wall around the relationships of those we care about. Their social connections profoundly impact every area of their lives, yet toxic people can cause tremendous damage. Construct relational boundaries that filter their social environment, allowing nurturing relationships to flourish while keeping harmful influences at bay. Like ancient cities that carefully controlled who entered their gates, give our loved ones discernment about whom to admit into their inner circles. Surround them with godly companions who will sharpen them like iron sharpens iron. Good morning, beloved brother and beloved sister in Christ. As we continue in this powerful work of intercession, I invite you to see with the eyes of faith the invisible walls rising higher and stronger around those you love. These are not walls of isolation that cut them off from community, but walls of protection that allow them to flourish in safety. They are not prisons that confine, but fortresses that defend, divine boundaries established by love to preserve what is precious. Righteous Judge, we build the fifth wall around the reputations of our loved ones. Their good names face threats from slander, misrepresentation, false accusation, and character assassination. Construct defensive barriers against these attacks, preventing unjust damage to how they are perceived by others. Just as ancient cities were known by the strength and beauty of their walls, let our loved ones be known by the integrity and character you develop within them. When their reputations are unjustly attacked, vindicate them in your perfect timing and your perfect way. Jehovah Jireh, our provider, we erect the sixth wall around the resources of those we love. Their finances, possessions, and material well-being face threats from poor stewardship, predatory schemes, economic instability, and unexpected crises. Build protective boundaries that preserve what you've entrusted to them, preventing unnecessary loss while facilitating generous sharing. Like the storehouses of ancient cities that were secured within defensive walls, protect their resources from depletion, corruption, and theft, ensuring they have sufficient supply for their needs and margin to bless others. Holy Spirit, we raise the seventh wall, the most important of all, around the spiritual lives of our loved ones. Their relationship with God faces relentless attack from the enemy who seeks to destroy their faith, derail their purpose, and distance them from their divine source. Construct impenetrable spiritual defenses that resist temptation, reject deception, repel discouragement, and refuse compromise. Surround them with the full armor of God described in Ephesians 6, the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, feet fitted with the readiness of the gospel of peace, the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit. Faithful Father, for loved ones who have not yet surrendered their lives to Christ, we build provisional walls of protection even in their wandering. While their ultimate security can only be found in relationship with you, we ask for temporary barriers that prevent them from reaching points of no return. Like the hedge you placed around Job, that even Satan could not penetrate without permission, place a divine hedge around our unsaved loved ones. Protect them from the worst consequences of choices made apart from your wisdom until they come to know you as Savior and Lord. God of all comfort, for those we love who are going through valleys of suffering, seasons of grief, periods of illness, times of hardship, we construct specialized walls of protection. Their vulnerability in these difficult passages makes them targets for additional attacks. Build compassionate boundaries that acknowledge their pain without allowing that pain to become their identity or destination. Like the ancient practice of posting extra guards on weakened sections of city walls, assign additional angelic protection to these vulnerable areas of their lives until strength is restored. Sovereign Lord, we establish multi-generational walls of protection that extend to future descendants of our loved ones. The enemy operates with long-term strategies, targeting not just individuals, but family lines. Construct dynastic defenses that break generational curses, interrupt negative patterns, and establish righteous legacies. Like the walls of Jerusalem that protected many generations of inhabitants, let these spiritual barriers we build today create safe spaces for children yet unborn, establishing family lines marked by faith, purpose, and divine protection. Most High God, we recognize that sometimes your protection doesn't mean preventing trials, but providing strength to endure them. Like the 3 Hebrew young men in the fiery furnace, who were not spared from the fire but joined by your presence within it, build walls of preserving grace around our loved ones in their fiery trials. When they must walk through floods, let these walls channel the waters so they do not overwhelm. When they journey through valleys of shadow, let these barriers filter the darkness so light remains visible. Prince of Peace, we construct walls of daily protection around the ordinary moments of our loved ones' lives. Their coming and going, their waking and sleeping, their working and resting, all these routine activities contain vulnerability without proper spiritual covering. Build continuous barriers that function not just in crisis moments, but in common hours. Like the walls of ancient cities that stood guard through quiet days and uneventful nights, let these spiritual defenses operate with constant vigilance, protecting not just against dramatic attacks, but subtle infiltrations. Lord of hosts, commander of heaven's armies, we establish walls with strategic offensive capabilities. Ancient city walls were not merely passive barriers, but platforms for active defense, with positions for archers and stations for watchmen. Similarly, build protective boundaries around our loved ones that not only block enemy advances, but enable counterattacks against spiritual forces of darkness. Let these walls serve not just as shields, but as launching pads for kingdom advance, allowing our loved ones to live not in fearful defense but in bold offensive for your glory. God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, just as you established protective boundaries around the patriarchs in their journeys through hostile territories, build mobile walls around our loved ones as they navigate changing landscapes in their lives. These spiritual defenses must not be static but dynamic, adapting to new threats and unfamiliar environments. Like the pillar of cloud and fire that moved with Israel through the wilderness, let these protective barriers travel with our loved ones wherever they go, providing continuous covering in changing circumstances. Faithful Father, we claim the promise of Zechariah 2:5 for our loved ones. For I, says the Lord, will be a wall of fire all around her, and I will be the glory in her midst. Saedos, while human efforts at protection ultimately fall short, you yourself stand as the perfect defensive perimeter. We ask that you would surround those we love with your very presence, a wall of fire that no enemy can penetrate, no attack can breach, no threat can overcome. For what greater protection could exist than the encompassing presence of Almighty God? Mighty God, we declare over our loved ones, Isaiah 54:17, no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. We understand that this promise doesn't mean weapons won't be formed or tongues won't rise in accusation, but rather that these attacks will ultimately fail. Build walls of divine promise fulfillment around those we love, ensuring that though the enemy may attack, his weapons will shatter against the barriers of your faithfulness, and his words will fall powerless before the bulwark of your truth. Precious Son and precious daughter of God, as we continue in prayer, I want to remind you that the defensive walls we're building are not theoretical concepts, but spiritual realities being established by faith. Throughout history, God's people have experienced supernatural protection that defied natural explanation, enemies inexplicably turning away, disasters mysteriously bypassing, threats suddenly dissolving. These same divine defenses are being constructed around your loved ones through your faithful prayers. Holy Spirit, our helper and guide, grant our loved ones discernment to cooperate with these spiritual defenses. The strongest walls offer little protection if gates are carelessly left open or guards abandon their posts. Teach those we love how to maintain the boundaries we're establishing through prayer. Show them how to identify breaches that need repair, weak points that require reinforcement, and gates that should remain closed to certain influences. But while we initiate these spiritual defenses through intercession, they must participate in maintaining them through wise choices. God of all grace, we recognize that sometimes our loved ones create gaps in their own protective walls through sin, through unwise choices, through neglect of spiritual disciplines. In such cases, we ask for your merciful intervention. Repair the breaches before enemies exploit them. Restore fallen sections before major damage occurs. Like Nehemiah, who led the rebuilding of Jerusalem's broken walls, guide them back to spiritual practices and godly choices that reinforce rather than weaken their divine protection. Gracious Lord, we acknowledge that some of our loved ones have lived so long without proper boundaries that they don't recognize their vulnerability. They've normalized exposure to spiritual dangers, emotional toxins, and mental pollutants. For these, we ask for a divine awakening to their need for protection. Like the citizens of Jerusalem, who initially scoffed at Nehemiah's rebuilding project, but eventually participated with enthusiasm, help our loved ones recognize the value of spiritual walls and actively engage in maintaining them. Lord of the breakthrough, where our loved ones face seemingly impenetrable barriers that hinder rather than help, walls of prejudice that block opportunity, walls of trauma that prevent healing, walls of fear that limit growth, we ask for strategic breakthrough. Not all walls serve beneficial purposes. Some need to be demolished rather than reinforced. Give discernment to distinguish between protective boundaries that preserve and restrictive barriers that imprison. Break down the latter while strengthening the former. God, who neither slumbers nor sleeps, we thank you that your protective vigilance never wavers. The most secure ancient cities posted watchmen who rotated shifts, but even then, human fatigue created vulnerability. You, however, maintain constant alert status, never drowsing, never distracted, never diminished in protective power. Even when we forget to pray, you remember to protect. Even when our intercession falters, your vigilance remains steadfast. What comfort to know that the one who watches over our loved ones is ever alert, ever aware, ever active in his defensive care. Father of mercies for the children we love, whether young in years or grown with children of their own, we build specialized walls of age-appropriate protection. The young require different defenses than the mature, with boundaries that provide security without preventing necessary growth. Construct protective barriers around them that shield innocence without sheltering from essential life lessons. Station angelic guardians along these walls, with particular attention to their developmental vulnerabilities. For Jesus indicated that children have assigned angels who always see the face of the Father in heaven. Beloved brother and beloved sister in Christ, as we continue building spiritual fortifications, remember that the most effective protective barriers are often invisible to physical eyes, but powerfully real in the spiritual realm. Like Elisha's servant who saw nothing until his eyes were opened to the angelic armies surrounding them, we must maintain spiritual vision to perceive the defensive walls being established through our prayers. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, and the most effective defenses against spiritual enemies are spiritual in nature. Lord Jesus, our great high priest who lives to make intercession, we join our prayers with yours. You are at the right hand of the Father right now, advocating for those we love. Your prayers are perfect, untainted by doubt or distraction, so we align our flawed intercession with your flawless petition. What comfort to know that when we don't know how to pray as we ought, your Spirit intercedes for us with groans too deep for words, and you perfectly translate our heart's cry into powerful walls of protection around our loved ones. God of all wisdom, we pray that our loved ones would develop what Scripture calls the fear of the Lord, not cringing terror, but that holy reverence that leads to wise living and provides its own protective barrier. For Proverbs tells us that the fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, turning a person from the snares of death. This internal wall of reverent respect for your holiness preserves from many dangers that external barriers cannot prevent. May they never grow so comfortable with your grace that they forget your holiness, or so familiar with your love that they neglect your commands. Father of lights, illuminate potential threats that our loved ones might otherwise miss. The most dangerous attacks often come disguised as opportunities, as gifts, as harmless choices. Like the Trojan horse that appeared to be a trophy but contained hidden soldiers, many of Satan's strategies present as beneficial while concealing deadly intent. Give our loved ones discernment to recognize deception before it penetrates their defenses. For walls are most effective when combined with watchfulness, and the brightest light exposes what darkness tries to hide. God, who reveals mysteries, we pray for dreams and visions that warn our loved ones of danger, just as you warned Joseph about Herod's murderous intent. When necessary, speak to them in the night seasons, revealing threats their waking minds might not perceive. Alert them to dangers through supernatural means, when natural discernment would come too late, and give them the wisdom to heed these divine warnings rather than dismissing them as coincidence or imagination. Divine Shepherd. When our loved ones must traverse dangerous territories, physically, emotionally, relationally, or spiritually, surround them with mobile walls of protection. Like the shepherd's rod and staff that defended the flock while moving through the valley of the shadow of death, provide dynamic defenses that travel with them into challenging environments. For some divine assignments require entering difficult spaces, and in these moments they need not stationary walls, but portable fortifications that adapt to changing threats. Righteous Judge of all the earth, for our loved ones who face systemic injustice, who suffer under oppressive structures, who experience discrimination or persecution, we ask for specialized protective boundaries. Their vulnerabilities in these situations are not of their making but imposed by unjust systems. Build defensive walls that preserve their dignity, their opportunity, their hope, and their safety while they navigate these challenging landscapes. Connect them with advocates who will stand with them, strengthening the barriers against injustice's corrosive effects. God of all comfort, for our loved ones suffering with chronic physical conditions, persistent mental health challenges, or ongoing spiritual battles, we build adaptive walls of protection. Their long-term struggles require defenses that acknowledge reality while preventing these conditions from defining their identity or determining their destiny. Construct boundaries that contain the impact of these challenges without allowing them to contaminate their entire existence, for walls should define what stays out, not limit what can develop within. Faithful Father, as our older loved ones age, we construct particular walls of protection for their senior years. Their changing physical and sometimes cognitive abilities create new vulnerabilities that require specialized defenses. Build barriers against exploitation, against isolation, against despair, against the diminishment of dignity that can accompany aging. Surround them with compassionate caregivers who reinforce rather than breach these protective boundaries. For gray hair should be a crown of glory, experienced within the safety of age-appropriate protection. May the peace of the Lord be with you, my brother and my sister. As we continue building spiritual walls around those you love, I encourage you to regularly inspect and reinforce these defenses through consistent prayer. Like the inhabitants of ancient cities who regularly maintained their protective walls, we must continuously strengthen the spiritual fortifications around our loved ones, for defensive barriers neglected eventually develop weak points, and the enemy is watchful for such vulnerabilities. Lord of the harvest, for our loved ones who labor in your fields, pastors, missionaries, ministry workers, those in full-time kingdom service, we build specialized walls of protection. The enemy targets these servants with particular intensity, knowing that when shepherds are struck, sheep scatter. Construct defensive barriers with extra reinforcement at points of unique ministerial vulnerability, their marriages, their children, their personal time with you, their physical and emotional health, their financial provision. Assign additional angelic guardians to these walls, knowing the strategic importance of protecting those who protect others. Sovereign God, for our loved ones serving in dangerous professions, military, law enforcement, emergency services, healthcare in crisis zones, we ask for extraordinary walls of protection. Their daily work exposes them to threats from which others are sheltered. Build specialized defensive barriers appropriate to these high-risk environments. Station angels along these walls with particular vigilance, knowing that those who protect others often neglect their own security. For greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for friends, but we ask that their sacrifice would be in service, not in preventable harm. God of nations, we build protective walls around the countries our loved ones call home. Their personal security is affected by national stability, and threats to nations impact individuals within them. Construct societal defenses against forces that would bring chaos, violence, economic collapse, or moral disintegration. Like the walls of Jerusalem that protected not just individuals, but an entire community, let these national barriers preserve environments where our loved ones can lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and reverence. Father of compassion, we erect defensive walls around the spiritual communities where our loved ones worship and serve. Their churches, their ministry groups, their faith fellowships face attacks aimed at creating division, introducing false teaching, stirring up scandal, or simply distracting from mission. Build protective boundaries around these communities, preventing enemy infiltration while allowing authentic seekers to enter. For healthy spiritual communities, themselves serve as walls of protection for their members, and when these communities are compromised, individual vulnerability increases. Great physician, we construct specialized walls around the health of our loved ones. Their physical well-being faces threats from disease, from environmental toxins, from accidents, from harmful lifestyle patterns. Build defensive barriers against these dangers, filtering what enters their bodies, protecting vital systems, preserving healthy function. When illness does breach these walls, minimize its impact and accelerate restoration. For bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, fearfully and wonderfully made, deserving protective boundaries that preserve their sacred design. Jehovah Nissi, our banner of victory. We build defensive walls around the minds of our loved ones. Their thought lives face relentless assault from negative media, pessimistic predictions, critical voices, and their own tendencies toward anxiety or despair. Construct protective boundaries that filter mental input, blocking toxic thoughts, while admitting those that align with Philippians 4:8. Whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, or praiseworthy. For mental walls determine much of life's experience, and those whose thoughts are protected find their emotions and actions naturally shielded as well. Holy Spirit, our counselor and guide, we pray that you would establish walls of wise counsel around our loved ones. Their decisions determine much of their destiny, yet wisdom doesn't emerge automatically from experience. Surround them with godly advisors who will speak truth even when it's difficult to hear. Connect them with mentors who model integrity and faith. Give them friends who ask hard questions and listen well to answers. For where there is no counsel, the people fall. But in the multitude of counselors there is safety. Lord God Almighty, we build protective walls around the homes of our loved ones, not just physical dwellings, but the emotional and spiritual environments they inhabit daily. Their domestic spaces should be sanctuaries of peace and security, yet many forces seek to invade this sacred territory. Construct defensive barriers around these homes, preventing the intrusion of division, violence, addiction, chaos, or spiritual oppression. Station angels at every entrance, guarding against both physical and spiritual threats. For when homes are secure, those within them have a base of operations from which to fulfill their calling. God of breakthrough, we claim powerful moments of divine intervention in the lives of our loved ones. Supernatural instances, when you personally reinforce weakened walls before enemies can exploit the vulnerability. Like King Hezekiah, who discovered at dawn that the angel of the Lord had struck down 185,000 Assyrian soldiers surrounding Jerusalem, let our loved ones experience dramatic overnight deliverances that leave no doubt about your protective power. For what seems like certain defeat in the evening can become miraculous victory by morning when the God of angel armies defends his own. Father, who works all things together for good for those who love you and are called according to your purpose, we trust that even when walls appear to fail, when tragedy strikes despite prayers, when harm comes despite precautions, when evil temporarily triumphs despite resistance, you are working at a deeper level than we can perceive. Joseph declared to his brothers, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." We claim this redemptive reality for our loved ones, knowing that your ultimate protection encompasses their eternal souls, even when temporal suffering occurs. Loving God, we recognize that sometimes the greatest threat to our loved ones' security comes not from external forces but internal choices, their own decisions, their own weaknesses, their own blind spots. So we pray for the development of internal walls of character that protect from within. Build in them integrity that resists temptation, humility that avoids pride's downfall, self-control that prevents appetite-driven destruction, wisdom that sidesteps foolish risks. For the strongest external fortifications cannot compensate for internal character deficiencies, and the most secure people possess both external and internal walls. Precious Son and precious daughter of God, as we near the conclusion of this time of protective intercession, I want to remind you that the walls we've built through prayer are not static structures, but living fortifications empowered by the Spirit of God. Like the walls of New Jerusalem described in Revelation, walls that gleam with precious stones, walls that contain gates that never close, walls that surround a place where God Himself dwells with His people. These spiritual defenses are both beautiful and functional, both protective and permeable to what should enter. Faithful Father, we build walls of protection around the marriages represented among our loved ones. These sacred covenants face relentless attack from external pressures and internal weaknesses. Construct defensive barriers against infidelity, against apathy, against miscommunication, against unresolved conflict, against financial stress, against outside interference. For strong marriages themselves serve as walls of protection not only for spouses but for children, extended family, and communities connected to them. Lord of the Sabbath, we pray for rhythms of rest that will serve as walls against burnout, against exhaustion, against the diminished discernment that comes with perpetual busyness. In a culture that celebrates overwork and constant connectivity, help our loved ones establish boundaries of time and attention that guard their physical, emotional, and spiritual health. For Sabbath is not merely a religious observance, but a protective practice designed by the Creator, who knows how His creation functions best. God of all peace, we construct walls against anxiety in the lives of our loved ones. In an age where worry has become normalized, build protective boundaries against excessive concern, against panic, against the spiral of worst-case thinking. Help them establish mental fortifications based on Philippians 4:6-7. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Righteous Judge, we recognize that sometimes you allow difficulties to serve as walls that redirect our loved ones from more dangerous paths. Like guardrails on mountain roads that may dent vehicles but prevent fatal plunges, these painful boundaries protect from greater harm. When necessary, let smaller losses prevent catastrophic ones, minor pain avert major tragedy, temporal discipline preserve eternal reward. For your discipline, though unpleasant for the moment, produces the peaceful fruit of righteousness in those who have been trained by it. Almighty Father, we pray for technological boundaries that protect rather than expose our loved ones. In an age of cyber vulnerability, help them build walls around their digital presence, their online interactions, their virtual identities. Give them wisdom about what to share, what to keep private, how to navigate virtual spaces with both innocence and street smarts. For new frontiers bring new dangers requiring new defenses, and those who establish appropriate digital boundaries avoid many modern pitfalls. God of surprises, we know that you often establish protection through unexpected means and unlikely people. Just as you used Rahab, a prostitute, to protect Israelite spies, and ravens to feed Elijah, and a young servant girl to direct Naaman to healing, we ask for divine setups in the lives of our loved ones, strategic connections, providential encounters, heaven-orchestrated moments that will establish protective barriers they could never have engineered for themselves. Lion of Judah, as we conclude this time of defensive intercession, we speak faith-filled declarations of protection over our loved ones. We declare that they dwell in the secret place of the Most High and abide under the shadow of the Almighty. We proclaim that God is their refuge and fortress, their God in whom they trust. We announce that He shall cover them with His feathers, and under His wings they shall take refuge. We affirm that His truth shall be their shield and buckler, and they shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor the arrow that flies by day. Faithful God, we thank You that protective boundaries are not merely a theological concept, but a practical reality in Your kingdom. Throughout Scripture and throughout history, You have demonstrated Your commitment to establishing walls of defense around Your children. So we intercede today not with desperate pleas, but with confident expectation, knowing that the God who sent His Son to secure our eternal protection will surely provide temporal covering for those we love, surrounding them with walls of salvation and gates of praise. Almighty God, as we bring this prayer to a close, we thank You for the privilege of participating in the protection of those we love through intercession. What an honor to partner with heaven in this way, to approach Your throne on behalf of others, to help construct spiritual defenses for those we cherish. Help us to be faithful in this ministry of protective prayer, not just today but in the days to come. Remind us to regularly inspect and reinforce these walls, to consistently claim divine covering, to continually envision those we love dwelling in safety rather than vulnerability. May God bless you, my dear brother and sister in Christ, for taking this time to intercede for those you love. Your prayers have established spiritual fortifications that will continue protecting your loved ones long after these words have ended. Continue to stand in the gap. Continue to build defensive walls through prayer. Continue to call forth divine protection over those you care about, for such prayers are precious in God's sight and powerful in their effect. If this prayer has touched your heart today, I encourage you to make protective intercession a daily habit. Share this prayer with others who need this same covering for their loved ones. Type Amen in the comments if you've prayed this prayer of protection over those you love. And remember, when we join our faith together, stronger walls are built, more secure foundations are laid, and God's protective power manifests in powerful ways in the lives of those we carry in prayer.